Hey, what's up guys, Nate again. And today I wanted to share a story about how I obtained my favorite piece in my collection, and that's my World of Nintendo display case. If you've seen my room tour, I've shown that off in pretty good detail, mostly the things inside it. But I wanted to take a few minutes to kind of talk about the actual cabinet itself and how I got it, and kind of show off a little bit of the finer details that may not have picked up in that video. So I guess in about 2011, I saw a picture online of the guy who had this exact cabinet in his basement. So I started looking around online, and I noticed that there was a few different models, and a lot of people had them in their collection. But I was on Nintendo Age, and a guy had posted a thread that he'd found one. I was like, man, that's fucking awesome. Like, that means they're still out there. There's a chance. So for the whole next week, like, I'm hardcore looking on Craigslist, like, a few times a day. Any, like, surrounding cities within, like, 8 to 10 hour drive. And about a week later, I found one, and it was only like an hour and a half from my house in Douglasville, Georgia, which is like the west side of Georgia, like almost Alabama. And I was like, shit, it's an hour and a half away. The dude's asking $40 for it, and I'm like, well, shit. So I call the guy. I'm like, yo, I want this. Like, hold it for me. And I don't have a truck. Keep in mind, so in order for me to get this thing home, I have to drive probably an hour north to my parents' house to borrow their truck, then drive their truck back to my apartment, and the guy was like, I don't know if I can help you move it. I was like, well, shit. And all my friends are at work and my wife's at work, but she was about to get off. So she got off and we went over there. So we got there about 8:30 or 9 o'clock. And the guy had it in his garage, and the doors were taken off and wrapped up in bubble wrap, which was really awesome because that would have been a hell trying to move that thing with the doors on. Because I think the doors weighed about 50 pounds a piece. They're just like solid glass. But so we get to the guy's house, and he's a super nice guy. He's like probably maybe a little older than me, but just had this thing in his garage. Apparently, a neighbor of his had picked it up from a store they worked at or a store they owned in the past, and were storing it in his garage. And they moved away, and I guess left it there. And he didn't want it. He wasn't into Nintendo. He looked more like a car guy. He had like a muscle car he was working on or something. But he's like, yeah, man, I don't know what to do with it. It's just been sitting here, and he's like, you can have it for $40. I'm like, I didn't want to show how excited I was because obviously I would have paid probably, I don't know, maybe up to $300-400 for it if I had to. But he said $40, and honestly, he probably would have taken less if I'd offered it. But he ended up helping me move it into the truck, which was great because it's pretty bulky and pretty heavy. Really, it's not that heavy. It's just awkward. It's like back heavy because there's nothing in the front when the doors are out, so it always has a tendency to fall backwards. And I'll get to another part of the story later on about that. So anyway, we get it up on the truck, and it's tied down like super ghetto. Like, we had some rope, and I think I don't even remember what we used. It wasn't proper like ratchet straps or anything like that. It was very shittily thrown in the truck. But it was tied down as good as we could get it. And we were able to get it all the way to my apartment complex without any kind of hiccups. But as soon as we got home and hit this little bump to go into my apartment complex, the whole thing just kind of like started to sway like this. And my wife jumped out of the truck and like tried to stabilize it, because I swear it almost fell off the truck into the street. And that would have just been like devastating. So we get up to the apartment building, and to get it inside, there was about 6 stairs, or we could wheel it up the hill on a dolly. I think it had been raining, so it was kind of wet. No, it had just started raining, so it was still kind of getting a little wet, and that hill was a little bit steep, so walking on it would have been difficult. So I knew I had to act quickly, because obviously I'm not going to leave this cabinet out in the rain all night, and I can't get it up the stairs. There's no way. It's too wide. So we had to go up this hill. Luckily, I had a dolly, so I pulled out the dolly, and keep in mind, this thing weighs probably, I don't know, close to 300 pounds. Maybe. It's a rough estimation. It's heavy as shit for one person to try to move. My wife was helping, but mostly just keeping it stable from, like, sliding down the hill. But I mustered up some kind of, like, Hulk adrenaline, and I got it in the house somehow. I'm not really sure how that happened still, because I was almost 100% positive the thing was going to topple down the hill at some point. So I got it inside, and it was missing the marquee across the top, the World of Nintendo banner. But I figured, you know, I could get that reproduced somehow. I know how to draw in Illustrator, so I could recreate that logo and take it to a sign shop and have them make it for me. I figured it might cost me like $150 to do that. But just for shits, I put out a feeler on Nintendo Age, just saying, hey, I got this cabinet. If anybody has this logo or knows where I can get one, or maybe a cheap place to get it reproduced, let me know. And people are replying about, oh, it's cool, fine, whatever. And then my buddy Justin, Penguin on Nintendo Age, he's like, I have that marquee for that, or that sign for that cabinet. I'm like, oh shit. So I PM him. I'm like, I want this thing. Like, if you don't have the cabinet and have the sign, like, that's perfect. Like, I want it. How much do you want? He's like, oh, my buddy Ed's got it right now. So let me get it back from him. I'm supposed to see him in a couple of weeks or something. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Even though I was like chomping at the bit to get this thing because I really wanted to see it like put up on the cabinet. He hangs out with his friend Ed, who is enslaved on Nintendo Age, and they make the exchange or whatever, and finally gets it out to me. I think he charged me $50 for it, which was more than reasonable. So I finally got the thing, and couldn't really figure out a good way to mount it because originally it had these little like pegs on the back of the sign, and those were broken off. I think because retailers were obligated to like remove any kind of signage from a cabinet before they got rid of it or threw it out. But this thing has 3 logos on it, and they only removed 1. So, end of the day, Justin had the sign I needed. So, I get it home, trying to figure out how to mount it. I didn't want to do anything like super permanent, like any kind of like epoxy, just in case it like the light shined through it weird and you could see like the epoxy behind the sign. So I used super glue, or not super glue, hot glue, and that worked pretty well for a little while. But when it got cold, the hot glue would like, I guess, get too soft or too hard, and it would just like let go. I guess the plastics didn't want to like hold together with hot glue very well. So the sign fell off like multiple times. I don't know why I kept trying hot glue, but I did it for about a year or two. Finally, I gave up and I just used some fucking epoxy when we moved into this house because I was tired of it falling off, and honestly, you can't see the epoxy anyway, so it's cool. And now it's up there for good. It's never fallen off again unless somebody hangs from it, and even then, I'm not sure. It would probably just break at that point. So when we moved, I found a glass cutter. Honestly, I paid more for the shelves than I did for the entire cabinet. They were like $100 to get the glass cut for those. But it makes a huge difference because now you can see the light goes through each shelf for the most part. A lot of the shelves are kind of packed with stuff, so not a lot of light makes it through, but enough does to where it looks pretty decent. I'll kind of go through and show off the cabinet in a little bit more detail. I'm not going to show the contents as much because I covered that in my room tour video, and not much has changed since then. But if you'd like to see that, you can check out that video. So here's the cabinet here. Here's the logo. Really awesome. I was actually in the process of recreating this graphic as he contacted me. I was trying to vectorize this logo and have it printed at a sign shop just because I was positive I wasn't going to find an original piece for this. But luckily, Nintendo Age collectors are a little crazy, and you can find almost anything you want on there if you're patient enough. And luckily, I didn't have to be very patient. I've shown the inside of this before. It's mostly where I keep a lot of kind of vintage 80s and 90s merchandise. And you can see the sides of this cabinet are kind of ridged like a NES cartridge. Get some more light on it. And it's kind of got like a textured plastic to it, almost just like an NES cartridge. If you go down to the bottom, it has a little Nintendo logo there. Originally it had a particle board little stand that it set on about 6 inches high, but the one that I had was pretty water damaged and was kind of falling apart, so we removed it. Most of the ones I've seen actually don't have that base anymore, but I figured if I needed to, one day I could rebuild it. It wasn't really that complicated. It was just basically a wooden base. But yeah, like I said, one of my favorite pieces. I don't know if we'll see the back, but no, there's no way we're getting back there. But there's definitely a huge logo. I'll show a picture over here. I've only got one picture of it because it was like the picture I got when we first got it home. Which I'll show some pictures up here of the first day that I got it back. You can kind of see the condition it was in. Not much has changed, honestly. We cleaned it up, and it's really all it took. There was a few spiders living in the bottom,
But that's to be expected. It's been in somebody's garage for a while.
So that is my World of Nintendo retail cabinet. Like I said, it's one of my favorite pieces of my collection, and even if I were to sell all these games behind me, that's probably one thing that I'll never get rid of. The story of finding it was just so perfect. Everything worked out like almost too perfect for me, and I don't know. It's one of those crazy items that I never thought I would own. It was kind of always a pipe dream. Yeah, I'll find one eventually. Whatever. I'll have to drive to like St. Louis to get it or whatever. I don't know, but yeah, within 2 weeks of looking, one popped up locally. So I'd say that's pretty lucky. And then finding the marquee within a week of that, can't complain, I suppose. But anyways, guys, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.